Welcome, Bearcat fans, to Week 2 of Bearcats on the Prowl. Your host, James Ernest, and our co-host, Mark Fightmaster. We're going to be covering the UT Martin game versus UC, and we'll, of course, previewing the Purdue game this upcoming week. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, it was a win. Wasn't the prettiest thing in the world, especially for the first, two and two-thirds quarters, but ultimately they came out with the win. I think UC's size, I think their speed eventually just wore down the Skyhawks. You'll get that when you're going up against an FCS opponent. So, there were some positives to take out of it. Being Cincinnati fans, we always want to dwell on the negatives, so it seems like there's more negatives. But, ultimately, they're 1-0 on the scoreboard.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, there were, like you said, there were a lot of good things to take away from the game. Coach seemed to be really happy, Tuberville, after the game at the press conference. And he was saying how he preferred it to be how the game was, where it wasn't just a straight annihilation, kind of like how Louisville played this last weekend when they won 70-something points, and it wasn't a game. Or these, this gets them ready for Purdue.
Right. They, kind of a gut check. They see what they can do when they face some adversity. So, yeah, I can agree. I can see why he would be happy with that, and it not just being coach speak. I think they had to battle. They faced a lot of adversity. The quarterback, Hayden Moore, didn't look impressive at first, a couple interception, and, they struggled on special teams. They struggled across the board, except for defense. Defense was pretty good most of the game. So I think I think they learned a lot about themselves. Now let's see what they can do this week against a much tougher opponent, even though Purdue is, not the class of the Big Ten. It's, they're tougher than UT Martin.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that was the funny thing. Another funny thing Coach mentioned in his post-game conference, how the offense actually was cheering for the defense after the game. Like they, basically were giving them kind of a game ball, basically, saying that how they had carried the team.
Yeah, they should have been. The defense kept them in that game. What they gave up, looks like they gave up 89 total yards rushing, and so I think that's pretty good. They'll be all right.
Yeah, speaking of rushing, Green, he had a solid game. He had 97 yards.
He did.
Yeah. So he had a good one, a long one at 23. Boone did solid. He got a touchdown as well, so that was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like to see, going forward, I'd like to see more out of Boone. I think he's just got to get through that initial wash, that initial traffic, because I think he's got, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's got a little more breakaway speed, and can get in the open field and get out there and get the big chunk gains. So I'd like to see some more out of him. Of course, it will help, if the offensive line steps it up a little bit. So
yeah, that was the weird part about it, was the first quarter, they had started two guys that had never started before at offensive line. One of them was a defensive lineman last year. Yeah, because that was us even up in the press box. They were like, "Hey, why aren't the other two starting?" And it turned out Coach Tubb covered that a little bit at the press conference as well. He mentioned something about some type of injuries, but if they were injured, they really wanted to play. So I guess they had been injured but gotten better, but I guess didn't have enough reps under them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It just
I could see that. Yeah. Well, hopefully they'll get that. Hopefully they'll be healthy this week. Hopefully they get that corrected. Because again, this is going to be a better team they're facing. I think I saw that UC opened up like a 6.5-point favorite going into this week. So on paper, perhaps the better team. We'll see what happens there. But again, they've just got to get more out of that offense. And it feels weird saying that after they put up 28 points, but one was on a pick six. They need to get more consistency. If Hayden Moore is going to struggle, then as well as I know, those defenses can just load up against the run and say, hey, you got to beat us with your arm, and we don't think you can. So, I think as he gets a little more comfortable, things will change. But, they're going to need to change quick this week so that we can get a better offensive show.
That's true. Well, the nice thing was when they did need a big play in the second half, Nate Cole, he stepped up on that fourth down and made one heck of a catch.
Yeah, he did. And that was nice to see, because we were a little worried, in our preview about the receivers,
exactly.
Not returning many at all. And it's nice to see him step up and make that big catch and maybe become the person that Hayden Moore is comfortable with, and he can go to in those situations, because that goes a long way for a quarterback, having somebody they're comfortable with. So hopefully he'll be able to do that from here on out.
Because that was a nice thing. It just felt like the ball was getting – we all felt like the ball was going to go to him, and somehow he still was able to get open. Because with being the senior, you kind of had to figure that's they're going to go to someone they can trust, especially on a big play like that on the fourth down.
Yeah, exactly. And it's nice to see that kind of leadership out of him.
And then I was pulling up the line. You're correct. UC's 6-point favorite.
Are they okay?
6.5 on another. So, yeah, that's nice that they're considered a favorite, but of the last 4 week 2 games, they've had some letdowns, especially last year against Temple. And I believe they played Miami of Ohio one year. It was a really close game in week 2, so they've had some tough times in week 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and interestingly enough, looking at Purdue, the last 6 times they've opened with a win, they've lost the next game since 2013. So this could be maybe a battle of the letdowns here. Trying to see who's not going to let down more. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of glad, like Coach was saying, that UT Martin gave them a game, so they, I think part of his logic was they know the things that they have to work on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's less likely they'll have the letdown. Yeah, like we were talking about the receivers. They had some good games. Gray had over 100 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Johnson did okay at 38. Lewis and Cole both scored touchdowns. Actually, I was right next to where Lewis was when he scored.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, and some of the highlights, the heavyset fellow with the white shirt, slightly off the field. That's me. Shoot, I saw.
Hey, I wondered how you got such a good picture of that, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was because I was like 5 feet from him, so that was nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, looking at the stats from the game, going back to Cole, he did have 6 receptions,
Mm-hmm.
And they were big receptions, and also the leading receiver was actually Devin Gray. He had 111 yards. So, he being Moore, is getting comfortable with some of those guys. And I'd like to see him settle down, and be able to look the field over and find them. Now, again, it's going to come down to that offensive line.
Exactly.
And
that was the big problem. He didn't look off receivers. He kind of stared them down at times.
I caught onto that too. And a couple times he didn't have time, to really look off that receiver. But as you are going to face better opponents, the Purdue's, and we were talking before, the Houstons, and the likes of those teams, he's got to have time because he is going to have to look off those DBs. He's going to have to get them to go where he wants them to go. by using his eyes. And if he cannot get the time to do it, it could get ugly.
Yeah, especially that Houston game. I mean, I know Mo Eggert, some of the other local media are very optimistic about that, but it's just, I mean, after seeing their game against Oklahoma, gosh, they're looking very tough. And they end up
they do. They look good.
And getting into the playoffs.
Oh, yeah. That's, I mean, Houston's got a very winnable schedule now. I mean, they are going to they do have to play UC, and I'm not discounting that. They got to play Louisville, who looked good. Again, they hung 70 on somebody. But there's going to be a couple tough games for them, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens at the end of the season.
Back from commercial, we're going to preview the Purdue game and get our predictions, and then our predictions and preview for the Purdue game, and set it up for next week. Sounds great.
Sounds good.
Okay. So, Mark, what do you think about Purdue?
Well, looking at how Purdue did last week, they beat EKU, or Eastern Kentucky, 45-24. That 21-point margin of victory can be attributed directly to three early interceptions. They had 2 interceptions in the first quarter, I believe, and then a pick 6 late in the second quarter. Those 3 interceptions got them out to a 28-8 lead. The first 2 put them in great field position for scores, and then obviously the pick 6. So that makes me a little bit nervous, especially with how Hayden Moore did early against UT Martin. They got an experienced defensive backfield with some good athletes there. So he's going to really have to be careful. We were talking about looking off receivers and trying to find himself some open passing lanes. So he's got his work cut out for him. But then, I feel that if the running game can pick it up, if we can get a little bit more out of Mike Boone, Tion Green had a good game. If we can get a little bit more out of Mike Boone, then we're not going to have to worry so much about relying on Hayden Moore. We were talking before about how you can't get down to some teams because then you're going to have to start throwing the ball a lot more. I think that's the situation here. Purdue is what the Bearcats are going to Purdue, and they're going to be playing there. They got the home crowd behind them. It's going to be that big atmosphere, that Big Ten atmosphere. So I think they're going to have to get out there early, and I think the Bearcats are going to have to punch them in the mouth, for lack of a better term. Exactly. Kind of like you said, establish the run, and just kind of get a nice mix there with the two of them. Yeah, because I agree with you. I mean, last week's game with Leroy Clark, the safety for Purdue, he ended up getting his second career pick. And you're right, that defense was looking really good. But then again, also, Purdue had a pretty good running game in that. They ended up getting 145 yards from their running back. Markel Jones. Yeah, he had a good game. Yeah, so he was looking solid there. But then again, when you're up early, you're going to have the running back get a good number of yards. You're just going to run the ball instead of passing it like crazy. Exactly. You can go for more of that possession, and when you look at their quarterback, and it's David Blough or Blow, I don't know how it's pronounced, but he actually ended up with 2 touchdown runs. So they're going to have to keep an eye on him, especially if Purdue gets down inside the 20-yard line in the red zone, because that running quarterback can be a major weapon. So they're going to have to watch out for him there. And then again, you can't take away from his arm. He had a 35-yard touchdown pass to, I believe it was D'Angelo Yancey, and he ended up throwing for 245 yards. He threw the ball 43 times. Yeah. So even though they got up early, they still like to throw that ball. So the Bearcats' defensive backfield is going to have to come up big. They're going to have to shut them down, and then hopefully we can get some push out of that front, the defensive line, the linebackers, and they can shut down that Markel Jones kid because he's a tough little running back.
Exactly. Yeah, the UC front line did okay in the game, but Edwards, their safety, their senior, he stepped it up. He ended up leading the team in tackles and then had 2 sacks of his own. So, yeah, if they can put pressure on him like that, that would be nice. Like you said,
yeah.
David, I mean, shoot, he's a sophomore, and he's playing really well for him. Purdue.
And that's good.
Yeah, so he could end up being next year or the year after, heck of a good quarterback for him. They could be doing well. But I know this is, like you said, this is going to be another tough year for Purdue compared to some of those other Big Ten schools, and with that schedule that they have.
Yeah, it's not an easy schedule. I was reading a couple things about them, and some people were celebrating the win over EKU because now they're not going to go 0-12. But again, this is not a team that UC can take lightly. Yeah, they're road favorites, but and I hate to use a cliche term, but this is a Big Ten football team.
Exactly.
And you got to be careful.
Exactly. That's kind of the same. Actually, who they remind me a lot of, not just because of the colors, is Vanderbilt.
Very good. Very good.
Other teams are like, they're just Vanderbilt. They don't win much. That's
right.
an SEC team. They're same with Big Ten. I mean, they're not, a low-rated conference. I mean, they're gonna. Let's see. They got Eastern, which is winnable. UC, which is winnable. Nevada, but then after that, Iowa, Penn State, Northwestern, Wisconsin. I mean, there's not really too many let-ups in that.
No, there aren't. And then with what Wisconsin did over the weekend to LSU, they're going to end up. Wisconsin will end up in the top 25 by the time Purdue plays them. So they do have their work cut out for them, and that's a danger because maybe Hazel's telling this team, hey, we got to get the wins when we can get them, and this is a game we should win. And they come out and they stick it to the Cats. Obviously, I hope that's not the case. So.
Well, what's your prediction? What do you think?
It's going to be close. I don't see this being a massive blowout on either way. I'm thinking a 3-point win for whoever wins. And my gut tells me 24-21 UC, 27-24, somewhere in there. I think it's going to be a 3-point Cats win.
That would be great. I like that number, but unfortunately, I'm going to flip it. I'm going to say Purdue 22, UC 17, something like that.
Okay, and that is that's a very realistic situation. So this is just one of those ones that seriously is a toss-up.
Next week we are hoping to have a former UC alum as one of our guests, and we hope you join us again as part of the Growing Truth Network. This is Bearcats on the Prowl with James Ernest and Mark Fightmaster.